Hello everyone, it's Elliot here, and this is going to be a very different kind of video. I'm in front of my Criterion shelves right now, and the plan is to take you through my entire collection and talk a tiny bit about each of the films in the collection. So this is going to be a very long video. I don't expect anyone to watch it in one go. So just keep it on in the background, treat it like a podcast, do whatever you want with it. Come back to it now and then, watch it in small chunks. I don't mind, just as long as you end up enjoying it. I want to keep this intro brief, but something that I want to point out, which I couldn't help but feel embarrassed when I was editing these videos, is that there are certain words that I just say over and over again. And it is quite comical how much I say these words. So I do apologise, but I'm sure you'll find it funny as you go along as well. You can even play a drinking game, so you'll see what I mean as you go through this video. But it's all a bit of fun, and you know, when you're just riffing and you've got no script, what else can you do? So without further ado, let's get into my entire Criterion collection. Okay, so I'm here in the movie room, and as you can see in front of me, I have my Criterion collection. So it pretty much fills almost this entire case. There is a few shelves at the bottom you can probably see where there's no Criterions. So starting at the top of the case here, I'll just address the elephant in the room. And that is that my Criterion collection is really not in any order whatsoever. The only sort of order to it is that I've got all of my box sets and digipacks here at the top, and then just the single plastic cases after them. That's really the only ordering, so nothing here is organised by spine number, or it's not alphabetized, it's not grouped by director, unless I've accidentally put them that way on the shelf. I kind of like the game of trying to find it amongst all the films here, and sometimes that actually makes me change my mind in terms of what I'm about to watch. Sometimes I'll be looking for a certain film and then I'll find something that I actually want to watch even more. So it keeps things interesting. I think eventually I will do some kind of organising here. I might do by spine number. I'm not too sure, but I like having the box sets up at the top, mainly because you'll see here, some of them are quite irregularly sized. Some of them are quite thick indeed, particularly if you look at the Jacques Demy set here. So by having them all together, it means I can maximise the space on my shelves and kind of play this weird version of Tetris where I try to fit as many on one shelf as possible without ruining the cases. So let's kick it off, shall we? So looking right at the top, actually on top of the shelves, you will see some non-Criterion things here. These are just like bigger box sets that I don't really have a better place for. So I've got the SureScope Arrow video set there, which I haven't actually cracked open yet. I need to get to that at some point. I've got the Star Wars 4K set. I've got the Columbia Classics 4K set. And then I do actually have two Criterion things here. I've got the Ingmar Bergman Cinema and the Zatoichi set. Now with Ingmar Bergman Cinema, I mean, this is one of the essential releases in the Criterion collection. And I think if you're even just a tiny bit inclined towards watching a Bergman film and enjoying them, the value that you get in this set, especially if you get it 50% off, there's just so much in here. And what I love about this set, if you don't already know, it's all organised, not chronologically in terms of when the films came out, but they're actually curated as though his filmography was a festival. So there is a festival order within the set, and it's really interesting seeing the films in that particular order because they're kind of grouped by theme and style. So it's just a great set. If you don't have this and you're interested, I definitely recommend looking at getting it. Over here you've got the Zatoichi set. Now this is a beautiful set. Again, I couldn't fit this on a normal shelf just because of the strange sizing of it. But you get, I think it's all of the films in the mainline Zatoichi series. And I can't remember exactly how many. I think it's about 25. It's about 25 films. So you get tons of value in here as well, if you can pick it up. So next we're going to move down here. So as you can see, I've got some box sets here mixed in with some digipacks and so on. So starting all the way here, we've got the complete Monterey Pop Festival. So if I pull this one out, you can see the artwork there. This is the UK release, as you can tell by the ratings logo there. Something that Criterion are very good at is releasing musical films, but I don't mean musical in terms of the genre, but films about music and music documentaries, performance films, and this is a great one to have. There's so much in here, great value in that box set if you're into music and that sort of thing. Then we move on to this one, Il Sorpasso, filmed by Dino Risi, a brilliant comedy, a summer comedy, definitely a feel-good movie, and I love the actors in this, Vittorio Gassman and Jean-Louis Trintignant, who recently passed away, rest in peace, brilliant actors. Then I've got Sancho the Bailiff from the master Kenji Mizoguchi. This is one of my favourite Mizoguchi films. I've got a few more from Mizoguchi in the Criterion Collection, but I do love this. Again, UK release, as you can tell by the ugly logo. I wish I could just scratch it off, but unfortunately, I can't. Then I've got the Three Colours trilogy. I love this set of films. I recently talked about it in a video on the channel, talking about some of my favourite Criterion box sets. It's just tremendous, life-changing cinema. And I suspect this might, in the foreseeable future, get a 4K release from Criterion, because I believe there is now a 4K release in France, but with no English subtitles, I think. So I've not been able to check that out. But I suspect we're going to see a 4K release of this sooner rather than later. Next to that, we have the Before trilogy from Richard Linklater. Again, I talked about this recently on the channel in that box set video. Another UK release, so if you're in the UK, this is one you can pick up quite easily. Just great films, conversational films, so if you like, not necessarily stream of consciousness, but it is just people talking and riffing, and they're great realistic looks at modern romance. So highly recommend these. Next to that, we got another trilogy. This is the Coca trilogy from Abbas Kiarostami. Again, such wonderful cinema. This was one I discovered through the Criterion Collection. I was familiar with Kiarostami before buying this, but seeing these films for the first time on these discs, they very quickly shot up to being some of my favourite films from the filmmaker. Just beautiful filmmaking. And I mentioned before, particular prowess from Kiarostami working with young actors in these films, which I greatly enjoyed. And then you have yet another trilogy. This is the Whit Stillman trilogy. 3 films. You've got Metropolitan, The Last Days of Disco, and Barcelona. These are, again, quite conversational films, kind of in the style of perhaps Woody Allen. Very talky, very middle to upper class kind of bourgeois look at society. Almost poking fun at the bourgeois, but also kind of making them relatable as well. And Last Days of Disco I particularly like because I'm quite a fan of disco music, and it's very interesting seeing that kind of scene and the end of that era depicted on disc here. Next to that, I have the Apu trilogy. This is from Satyajit Ray, one of the greatest filmmakers in world cinema of all time, for sure. Just incredible filmmaking. Kind of a realist look at the young boy's life, poverty. Yeah, just brilliant films. Not my favourite films from the filmmaker. I do have some more of his films in the collection, which I'll talk about shortly. But definitely something to look towards. If you're a fan of realism, if you're a fan of Ken Loach and Mike Leigh, this was definitely a cultural touchstone for those filmmakers. So definitely worth checking out. Next to that, I have a very important film for myself. This is The Princess Bride, in such a very unique packaging from Criterion here. I really love this release. The reason it's so important to me, this was actually the first film that me and my fiance saw in the cinema together almost 5 years ago now. So a very important film to me, will always hold a special place in my heart. And yeah, I love having it in the Criterion Collection. I was so happy when it got announced in this edition. So a wonderful film. I love this. Next to that, we have Night of the Living Dead. I don't need to talk too much about this. Such an iconic film. Everyone knows this. Definitely deserves its place within the Criterion Collection. And it just got announced that Criterion are releasing this on a 4K UHD. So that is one I will be upgrading later this year. So I'm looking forward to having that in the collection in the place of the standard Blu-ray. Next to that, we have quite a thick release, so I'll pull this one out. This is The Furies. This is a film from Anthony Mann, a Western which is kind of atypical because a lot of Westerns at the time didn't focus on a female character. It was just quite unpopular because I think audiences at the time didn't really desire it. They wanted to see a strong male character in the lead. So unfortunately, not a lot of Western stories got told with strong female characters. Funnily enough, Barbara Stanwyck was actually one of the exceptions here, along with perhaps Joan Crawford. She also did 40 Guns with Sam Fuller. The Furies is just such a good film. And this release actually comes with the novel as well. That's why it's so thick, because you get a full book with it as well. I was so happy when this got upgraded to Blu-ray in the collection quite recently, because Anthony Mann is one of the greatest Western film directors. A director who the French filmmakers from Cahiers du Cinema and the French New Wave particularly liked. They sung his praises in the 60s. And perhaps without them, we wouldn't be seeing a lot of Anthony Mann's films surfacing in such great editions. So I'm thankful for that, and I'm thankful that this got a wonderful Blu-ray release. So next to that, we move on to the next little section of my shelves. I've got The Leopard. This is from Luchino Visconti, starring the wonderful Burt Lancaster. You've got Alain Delon, and Claudia Cardinale is in this as well. Just a wonderful story, an adaptation of a famous novel. A look at opulence, a look at the politics of the time. Just a wonderfully beautiful film as well. This is one of Martin Scorsese's favourite films because it is stunning to watch in colour. And an interesting period of Burt Lancaster's career because he went over to Italy and made a bunch of great films. He made a few with Visconti actually. So yeah, this is the old Digibook release, not Digibook, Digipack release. I think this is now in a normal plastic case if you want to get this. Next to that, we've got Bob Dylan, Don't Look Back. This is the documentary from D.A. Pennebaker. A great documentary, and this is a film that actually got me quite interested in Bob Dylan, because before this, to be honest with you, I didn't really know much about him, hadn't really experienced his music all that much. So this film really helped me appreciate him as an artist and a musician. So I'm thankful for that. Then I have Breathless from Jean-Luc Godard. Very important film in the history of cinema, the French New Wave. Many people love this film. I love this film as well. I recently mentioned that it was overrated in one of my videos, which got a lot of vitriol from some people. And I understand that many people hold this film very dear. So I'm sorry to those that I offended. But yeah, a great film, definitely deserves its place in the collection. Then we have this big box set. This is America Lost and Found, the BBS story. So you can see here on the front, this is the list of films that you get included in here. Many wonderful, great films from an exciting period in independent cinema within America. And here you see many directors and actors kind of get their footing in the industry. Of course, you've got Jack Nicholson in here, Dennis Hopper, Peter Fonda. You've got a young Jeff Bridges in the Last Picture Show. So yeah, just a brilliant set of films. Like I said, very important in American independent filmmaking. So yeah, very happy to have this in the collection. What a wonderful set. Next to that, I've got Ugetsu, another Kenji Mizoguchi film, often cited as one of his masterpieces, and I can't really disagree with that. It is a wonderful film. Then I've got The New World from Terrence Malick. I love this film, and I think it's actually one of Malick's best works. I know a lot of people love The Tree of Life, and I think The Tree of Life is a great film, and you'll probably see that fairly soon on these shelves. And yeah, speak of the devil, here is The Tree of Life, the Palme d'Or winning film from Terrence Malick, which, if you try to describe what this film is about, it's about everything really. It's about the creation of the universe, life itself, maybe looking at the meaning of life, while also looking at family life and quite intimate relations between people. So yeah, quite indescribable really. I'm not really doing it justice. Definitely one to check out. Then I've got Moonrise Kingdom from Wes Anderson. Quite a charming film. I really like the two young actors in this. And of course you've got the regulars that show up in Wes Anderson movies. You've got Bruce Willis in here, Ed Norton. Yeah, really fun film. This next one is another set that I spoke about on the channel recently. This is David Lean directs Noel Coward. Some great early films from David Lean before he went on to make those great epics, such as Lawrence of Arabia. Not much more to say really. If you're a fan of early British cinema, 40s cinema, definitely check this out because the whole set of films are great. Next to that, you've got the Bruce Lee Greatest Hits set, which pretty much encompasses his whole career on screen in cinema. Great set to have, particularly if you're a fan of martial arts and Bruce Lee himself. I was very happy when this got announced. Quite surprised as well. I didn't think we would ever get Enter the Dragon in the Criterion Collection, but here we are. Next to that, I've got Red River. This is the film from Howard Hawks, starring John Wayne and Montgomery Clift. Yeah, this is another one of those that you can see that you get the original novel with it, which is always, you know, a nice little thing to have. I think this is one of Howard Hawks' best films. Doesn't quite surpass Rio Bravo for me, but I would love Rio Bravo to join the collection. I don't think that'll ever happen because it's quite a big seller otherwise, but maybe one day. And next to that, rounding off this section of the shelf, we've got Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me. Some people really love this and they think it's actually Lynch's best work. I'm not sure I'm in agreement with that, but it is quite a peculiarity in his filmography. And as part of the Twin Peaks canon, a lot of people say this is very important. Then we've got Do the Right Thing from Spike Lee. Very happy when this got announced from Criterion a few years ago. Actually, funnily enough, I was recently in New York City and it was so hot in the city. The weather and the temperature was just so high. So I kept thinking of this film and how I feel watching this film. You can really feel the heat through the screen in this. So yeah, wonderful film from Spike Lee. Probably his best film. I don't think many people would dispute that. Next to that we have Blue Velvet from David Lynch. I was just watching an analysis of this film from the philosopher Slavoj Žižek, which got me really intrigued and made me want to re-watch this soon. So I might have to pull that off the shelf and watch that very soon. Then we've got Blow Up, the great film from Michelangelo Antonioni. Very different to the films that he was making in Italy, and a film looking at voyeurism and very influential on many filmmakers to come who watched this and sourced inspiration from a 4K digital transfer. So I do wonder if in the next few years we'll see a 4K UHD disc of this. Then we got Slacker from Richard Linklater. This was his debut feature film. This is one that I've never been totally enamoured by. I recognised the great talent and, you know, the beginnings of his career in this film. But some people actually say this is their favourite Linklater film, which I don't quite understand. But I will revisit it for sure in the future, and maybe I will change my tune on that. Another Linklater film, and this one is certainly one of my favourites from him. Dazed and Confused, just a great chill out film, and I love the Criterion packaging on this digipack. Now for a film that couldn't be more different to Dazed and Confused, it's Andrei Rublev. This is the Andrei Tarkovsky film. One of the most profound films that looks at faith and religion and one man's quest to kind of get through life and, you know, spread the message. I still don't think I fully get everything from this film because I've only seen it a couple of times, and this is one of those that I feel like you could watch it endlessly and still get more from it. So yeah, a profoundly important film, sort of an enigma like many of Tarkovsky's works. So I think I will be rewatching this over my life until I leave this earth. So yeah, very important film. Then we have The Silence of the Lambs, the Jonathan Demme film that everyone knows. This big award winner when it came out. I was so happy when this came out because it got a 4K digital restoration, and the older disc that we had in the UK looked absolutely terrible to my eyes. So this was a vast improvement. I know that Kino Lorber have done a 4K disc of this. I haven't picked it up, so I can't really compare, but I'm very happy with that particular release. Then we've got On the Waterfront. This is the Kazan film, very famous film with Brando. Not my favourite Kazan film. I'll probably be talking about my favourite Kazan film later in this video. But yeah, iconic performance from Brando, kind of put him on the map, and a great release from Criterion. We have Roma from Alfonso Cuarón. This is his, I think it's autobiographical. I think he's said that it's based on his childhood, although I might be mistaken now. Very beautiful film, very touching. In many ways kind of has that spirit of Fellini and 8.5, because it feels quite dreamlike at times, and looking at the life of a boy, going through different events in his life. This was produced by Netflix, or at least distributed by Netflix, and I actually got the chance to see this on the big screen a week before it came out on Netflix, here in Manchester at Home Cinema. I went with my friend Dan, and it was just a great time. We loved seeing this on the big screen, so I'll never forget that, and I'm very happy it got a Criterion release sometime after that with a bunch of special features. Next to that, you've got the 3 silent classics by Joseph von Sternberg. These are, as the box set suggests, these are some of his silent films before he came to Hollywood with Marlene Dietrich. I don't enjoy these films as much as his sound films with Miss Dietrich, but nevertheless they show some of his incredible talent that he had in the silent period and would show, you know, where he would go to next. So great set of films in the Criterion Collection. I have Mirror. This is another film from Tarkovsky. One of the best Criterion releases from last year. I really enjoyed getting this one. And it just means now that we only have 2 more films that need to come to the collection from Tarkovsky. We're just missing Nostalgia and The Sacrifice. So maybe one day we will have all 7 of his masterpieces in the collection. But yeah, very enigmatic film, all about dreams and memory. Again, I can't really describe what it's about. I'm not too sure. I just know that it makes me feel a certain way, and can't really describe how it makes me feel. I just know that it's a film that I love watching. Next to that, we have another dreamlike, oniric film. This is Picnic at Hanging Rock from Peter Weir. Again, this is one of those thicker digipacks or box sets that comes with the original novel by Joan Lindsay. I find this film so intriguing. It's such a spiritual film, and I've watched this so many times now, and it's just transportative. It really takes you to a different time and place, and that music, that, is it a flute or some kind of wind instrument? I can't remember what it is exactly, but the score in this just really sets the mood. I love this, and I haven't really seen much like this film since. And I believe there's a 4K release coming out soon from Second Sight, so I'll definitely be picking that up. But that's Picnic at Hanging Rock. And then finishing off the first shelf in my collection, it's the complete Jacques Tati set from Criterion. Joyous films from the brilliant Tati, very inventive, comedic. These are just very easy watching, and at the moment I'm trying to improve my French language because I only have, basic understanding of the language, and watching these films is really helping. So yeah, that's the Tati box set. So making my way down to the next row of the shelves now, we have Hedwig and the Angry Inch. This was one of those blind buys that I discovered through the Criterion Collection and couldn't be happier with. Such a fun, important movie. Then we've got Seven Samurai. This is actually spine number 2 in the collection, so a very early part of the Criterion Collection. It is such a wonderful film, very important in the history of cinema, and a film I greatly enjoy. Then I've got Nashville from Robert Altman, one of my favourite films, a great film about music and about the interactions between people. Just one of the greatest, really is. Not a lot like it as well. There have been some imitators in the past, but really Altman did this the best. Then we've got the Battle of Algiers, another greatly important film, very inspirational for a lot of people, kind of blending reality and fiction and touching on, very important matters in real life. We got Babette's Feast. This is a Danish film from Gabriel Axel, one of the finest films about food, and just a joyous film to watch. I greatly enjoy this film, and I'm so happy it's part of the collection. We've got Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. Stanley Kubrick, I absolutely love. You know that if you're familiar with me at all. And this just remains such a timeless film. And this is a great addition as well. It's got some really fun packaging. There's some little things inside which are really fun. This is from a 4K digital restoration. And I know that there is a 4K disc out there. You can get it separately, and I know it's in one of those big Columbia Classic sets. But yeah, such a incredible film. Peter Sellers, what an incredible comedic actor. Then I have The 400 Blows from Francois Truffaut. This is one of those early kind of slipcase releases from Criterion. I think this came out 2008 for this Blu-ray. So yeah, this is a very early one indeed. And I feel like I might be wrong, but I think this has had a 4K release in France. I'm sure I saw that, or maybe there's been a new restoration. So I imagine this is something that will get upgraded one day. But just, a powerful film, a great film about childhood and feeling, out of place. And one of my favourite films from the French New Wave. If you ask me, I much prefer Truffaut to Godard. Then I got Breaking the Waves from the controversial filmmaker Lars von Trier. This film truly shocked me when I watched it for the first time. A very strange film, because at once it's looking at innocence, but then it's also looking at sex and sexual repression and faith and the sublime, the divine, all sorts. This is a wild film with some brilliant performances from Emily Watson and Stellan Skarsgård. So yeah, such a wild film, really wild. I do wonder if Criterion is planning any more Von Trier films to enter the collection. Then we've got All About Eve. This is an iconic film. Bette Davis, Anne Baxter. Famously, this is the film that beat Sunset Boulevard to the Best Picture Oscar in 1950. If you ask me, I've got to admit Sunset Boulevard is my preferred film, but this one is no slouch. This is a great, enjoyable film. Then we come to the Dietrich and von Sternberg in Hollywood set. This is an incredible set. Yeah, what more to say? This is some of von Sternberg's best work, definitely some of Marlene Dietrich's best work, and you get so much value in this box set. You get 6 feature films there. Yeah, incredible value. I know that this has been, or this set of films has been released by Indicator in the UK, but I actually own both sets. I own this and the Indicator because there's a lot of different special features between the two, so I figured it was worth having the old double dip. This one, Investigation of a Citizen Above Suspicion. This was one of those wonderful blind buys from Criterion. I knew nothing about this film, and then I think, when did I get this? I think I was actually in America when I bought this. So I think I saw it on the shelf. I thought, oh, that is such an intriguing cover. And I think I checked out some of the reviews online and I was like, yes, this sounds like my kind of thing. Basically about this police, is he a police, not general, what do I want to say? He's high up in the police and he is the murderer and he's getting away with murder, and the police are looking for who is the murderer, and it's all about how far can he push his luck, how prideful is he, how much does he try to get away with, knowing that he's in such a position of power. So it's also, you know, satirical, something that's very relevant to today because we see lots of people in power getting away with all sorts of crazy things. So yeah, such an incredible film. Definitely check it out if you've not seen it. I know it has a UK disc as well, so you can get it on Criterion in the UK. So yeah, definitely want to check out. Then I've got Jules and Jim. This is another Francois Truffaut film. I really love this film as well. Like I said, Truffaut, probably one of my favourite French New Wave directors. Then we have The Freshman. This is Harold Lloyd. Harold Lloyd often doesn't get talked about as much as Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton as being one of those great comedic actors in the silent era. But his films, I mean, through the Criterion Collection, I've become so acquainted with many of his films, and he was such a talent, and these films are so fun to watch. So I know there's a bit of a kind of modern stigma about going back and watching silent movies. People think, how fun can they be? They can be a lot of fun. And ones like The Freshman are where you can really give it a shot. What I like about them as well is some of them are quite short indeed. This is only 76 minutes. So when you've just got not enough time for, you know, a proper 3-hour-long film, but you've got 70 minutes, perfect for that. Then I have the 3 films by Louis Buñuel. This is The Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie, Phantom of Liberty, and That Obscure Object of Desire. These are satirical, farcical films. They are comedies, but really scathing comedies looking at society and politics and just life in general. Some really shocking stuff as well. Like there's one of the I don't know what you call it, one of the devices or motifs in Phantom of Liberty, is where there is this sniper on the top of a skyscraper, and he's just shooting random people in the street, and everyone is just going about their business as normal as people are dropping to the floor. So quite shocking and subversive, but that's been well. Then I have Mulholland Drive, which I recently talked about on the channel. I might have mentioned that I think it's overrated. Some people seem to mistake that as me hating the film. I actually did say in my video that I greatly appreciate it. I even think I love this film. I just don't think it's as good as a lot of people claim it to be. But that's a conversation for another time. It's a film I really do appreciate. This is not the 4K release. This is just the standard Blu-ray. So I do need to check out the film on 4K. I know that Studio Canal have done a UK disc here, so I think I'll check that out soon. Next we come to a set of samurai films, Lone Wolf and Cub. This is based off a famous set of stories. I want to say it was a manga. Was it a manga that these are based on? God, that shows how uninformative I am about these films. I loved these films when I watched them. A lot of people have famously pointed out that it was an inspiration on the Star Wars Mandalorian TV show, because it's about this warrior who's got this young baby to protect, and it's all about, you know, their travels and such. A brilliant set with some surprises inside the box set. Next to that we have this big boy. This is the Jacques Demy Essential set. You can see the films that it contains on the side. These are some of my favourite French films of all time. I just recently watched Young Girls of Rochefort, and that film is just incredible. I mean, absolutely incredible. If I take this off the shelf, this is the old dual format release, so you actually get all the DVDs in here as well. So it's quite thick, but it's a beautiful set. I love the colours on the spines as well. I guess I could actually present it on the shelf that way around, but I quite like the clean look of how it is here. But this is one of my favourite box sets in the collection. Then we move over to Eric Rohmer, the 6 Moral Tales, with some of his most well-known films like Claire's Knee and Love in the Afternoon. Great set, really great set, and it's got the book. What's in the book again? I'm trying to remember. Oh yes, it's the English translation of the stories on which each of the films are based. Because it's been ages since I've gone through this set. But yeah, I'm a big fan of Rohmer. I've also got Arrow Video released a box set of a bunch of his films. It's got ones like The Aviator's Wife and such. So yeah, big fan of Rohmer. Something very different. Mishima, A Life in 4 Chapters, the film from Paul Schrader, with such a shiny case. And look, you can even see me. Yeah, such a weird looking release, but it kind of is characteristic of the film itself. Many people consider this one of Schrader's best works, and I think I'm in agreement. It's just so powerful, so out there. This is not a film about realism. This is definitely, you definitely know you're watching a film when you watch this. Yeah, the sets and the cinematography, absolutely great. Then I have another David Lynch film. This is Eraserhead. This is his debut feature. Very strange film, and a lot of creepy images, quite haunting film. But I do enjoy watching this. Next to that, we have Y Tu Mama Tambien, another film from Alfonso Cuarón. This is the film he made in the early 2000s, an odyssey about love and coming of age. Very enjoyable film. This is one I didn't see when I was young. I imagine this film would have been very formative had I seen it when I was the age that the two boys are in this film. But no, it's one I only saw in the last few years. It's a great release. Next to that, we have Martin Scorsese's The Irishman. This was the film released on Netflix. And this was one of those surprising ones when it got announced that Criterion were partnering with Netflix for some physical releases. This was one of those that was announced. I really need to go back and watch this sometime soon. And I think in anticipation for his new film, I think I'll be doing so. Then we've got Vampire from Carl Dreyer. I recently talked about this on the channel because Eureka have just released their own release of this, which is an improvement. So if you're a fan of Vampire, I definitely recommend checking the Eureka out. But it's got a thick booklet, so that's why it's one of these thick ones on the shelf. But a great film about horror and a great reminder of mortality. That's how I'll put it. And rounding this little bit of the shelf off, I've got The Grand Budapest Hotel from Wes Anderson. This is my favourite film of his to date, one I love returning to. Moving on, we have Citizen Kane, one of the most famous films ever made. This was a big announcement when Criterion announced they were releasing it on 4K Blu-ray, no less. Something to point out with this, and hopefully you can get what I mean. This one annoyingly sticks out of the shelf because for some reason Criterion decided to go with this packaging. I still don't like the design of this release. As I'm holding it now, it's already starting to slip out of the bottom. And I think over the years this is going to really suffer from wear and tear. But yeah, annoyingly the case is longer than a normal Blu-ray case, so it sticks out. Just not that I have OCD, but I do have some kind of compulsive tendencies, and that it just annoys me, really does. Next to that, we have The Magnificent Ambersons from Orson Welles. Famously tragic that the cut that Orson Welles wanted, the initial rough cut of the film, was trashed in about half an hour, or even more than half an hour. Half an hour's worth of footage was lost forever. And there's still an ongoing search for the lost footage of this film. It's currently, I think they're in Brazil. They're looking for the footage in Brazil because that's where Orson Welles was at the time that rough cut was known to exist. And apparently some people say that they've seen a tin with an Orson Welles film in, so that's like a lead in the investigation. But even in the current state, the film is a brilliant film. I love the artwork on this as well because, as you can see, it looks like the piece of artwork is unfinished. It looks like it's just a sketch drawing around the edge, and that's to signify that the film is currently unfinished. So yeah, a great release. Very happy when this got announced. I just really hope that one day we get to see that missing footage. Next to that, we've got Marriage Story, the Noah Baumbach film, which was a big awards film the year it came out. This is another one of those Netflix movies that got a Criterion release. I'm quite a fan of Noah Baumbach's work, and I'm looking forward to his new film. Then I got Menace to Society. This is a 4K release, a beautiful looking 4K disc. Very important story, very important film. Still highly relevant to today, unfortunately. But yeah, a great film that I was very happy to get on 4K. Then there is Sex, Lies and Videotape. This is the Steven Soderbergh movie. Brilliant feature film debut, which won the Palme d'Or at Cannes. Yeah, great film all about voyeurism. Yeah, I love that film. Then we've got True Stories. This is the David Byrne film. I think it's the only film that David Byrne directed, and yeah, it's absolutely great. It feels like you're watching a Talking Heads movie, because you know that kind of is what it is. And John Goodman is great, and you get a real sense of location in that film. So I do love that film. Then we have one of my favourites, Sweet Smell of Success, from Alexander McKendrick. Such a dark noir film about corruption in journalism and business. Two great central performances from Tony Curtis and Burt Lancaster, and shot by the great James Wong Howe. And there are some features on the disc about James Wong Howe as a cinematographer. And then we come to the last of the Digipack and box set releases on my shelf, which is currently Uncut Gems, the Safdie brothers films. I now can't think about this film without thinking of Julia Fox going, Uncut Gems. But this was a great addition to the collection. I really hope we see Good Time, because Good Time's a film that I really enjoy as well. So we begin looking at some of the single title releases in the standard cases in my Criterion collection. And as I said, they're in no order. They're mostly just random on the shelves. So we'll begin with Ratcatcher, a film from Lynn Ramsey. What you think is going to be just a boring social realism film actually is elevated to sort of a magical level. So really enjoy Ratcatcher. Tampopo, when I watched this for the first time, hadn't seen anything like it, and I still don't think I've seen anything like it. A great film about food. It's a Western. It's bizarre. It's got all these different stories going on, some great characters. Just love Tampopo. Robinson Crusoe on Mars. So this is one of those sci-fi films from the 60s where now it kind of feels a bit hokey, a bit B-movie-esque, because I mean some of the effects and the costumes and the sets are a bit laughable, but actually that is part of its charm. This is one of those perfect Saturday morning kind of movies that you can just put on and just enjoy for what it is. Next to that is Akira Kurosawa's Dreams. This is one of my favourite Kurosawa movies. A beautiful film all about dreams and sort of, what would I say? It's like a tribute to art itself, with Martin Scorsese playing Vincent van Gogh. Then we have Secrets and Lies from Mike Leigh. I've talked about this on the channel before. I think it's Mike Leigh's best film, and yeah, just a wonderful British film. Then we have the film Mate One. This is a John Sayles film. A very important film about unionisation and workers coming together to fight against corruption. And yeah, I was so happy when they announced this being added to the collection. Looks brilliant on the 4K digital restoration as well. And got some great actors in there. James Earl Jones is in the film. Then we got Solaris from Andrei Tarkovsky, who I talked about before. This was one of his science fiction movies, and yeah, it's a great film that it takes me to another place. There's nothing quite like this. There have been many imitators, but he had such a unique approach to cinema. Then we've got Michael Cimino's Heaven's Gate. This is famously the film that sunk United Artists, because it just went so over budget. And the film is so long in its current state, 216 minutes. Famously never really got finished, so the cut that we see is basically what we've got. I mean, this is the full director's cut, so you do see more of Cimino's vision, but I still believe there's a lot more that was due to be filmed, and it just got cut short. In its current state, you can see that it is a mess, but I think it might actually be some sort of masterpiece. I'm not too sure, but a brilliant look at American life. Then I've got Army of Shadows, Jean-Pierre Melville, one of his best films, and just a beautiful film. For ages, this was out of print from Criterion, and then they got the rights back, and now we have it back in the collection. So one of the best French war films of all time. We've got Sid and Nancy from Alex Cox, the film all about Sid Vicious, shot by Roger Deakins. This is a great film. Not my favourite Alex Cox movie, but definitely very enjoyable. Then we got The French Lieutenant's Woman, and this is a film that I actually kind of struggle with. I think it's a bit too postmodern for its own good. It's like the telling of a story within a story, based on a famous book, I believe. Yep, John Fowles' novel, of course. Yeah, when I've watched this, it just doesn't hit me. I don't quite know why. I just think it's trying to be a bit too clever, and that might annoy some people. But yeah, I think it's just one I'm going to have to give a few more goes. And then the last one here is Tiny Furniture, the Lena Dunham film. This is one that people always talk about being confused as to why it's in the Criterion Collection. And I can totally understand that. It's not a film that I like, really. In a way, I sort of find it inspirational because she managed to make this film out of nothing and she's got to where she is today. So it's inspirational in that sense, but in terms of pure enjoyment and entertainment, I don't think this is a great film. We then move down to the next row, and I hope you're enjoying this so far. If you are, I'll put out the usual spiel now: like and subscribe to the channel, etc, etc. But let's continue. So down here we have the film Desert Hearts. This is a great look at love and romance, a complete blind buy that I picked up when it came out here in the UK. So yeah, I have a fond appreciation for Desert Hearts. Then I have La Notte. This is Michelangelo Antonioni's brilliant film, part of that trilogy with L'Avventura and L'Eclisse. Such an interesting approach to filmmaking with some great performances. Then I have The Last Temptation of Christ. This is Scorsese's and Paul Schrader's take on the story of Christ, which goes in some very different directions. Then I have Secret Sunshine from Lee Chang-dong, and I really hope that we get more of his films in the collection, because from the ones that I've seen, I've had such a great time. I really enjoy Burning. Burning is probably my favourite of his. Next is Carnival of Souls. This is a great little independent horror movie. Has such a unique atmosphere and really does chill me to the bone. Speaking of chilling me to the bone, Leave Her to Heaven, John M. Stahl, with Gene Tierney's character that just absolutely savage. A brilliant femme fatale noir movie in full Technicolor, and it looks beautiful. Then I've got Certain Women. This is the Kelly Reichardt movie. Very touching movie, quite lyrical. I really do enjoy Kelly Reichardt's movies, and I would love to see her film First Cow come to the collection. Then I have Tokyo Drifter from Seijun Suzuki, a very stylish movie. He's known for making quite stylish movies that look at the criminal underworld in Japan, the Yakuza and the gangsters. This is a brilliantly fun movie that I would recommend to fans of crime movies. Then I have Jean Renoir's Les Règles du Jeu, The Rules of the Game. A very funny satirical comedy that kind of takes the upper class and rips them to shreds. Jean Renoir, I mean, what can I say here about him other than one of the greatest French filmmakers of all time? Rosemary's Baby. This is the Roman Polanski movie. Still such a very chilling movie. The dream sequence in this is absolutely frightening. You know the sequence I mean, if you've seen it. This is now out of print, so this can't be bought from Criterion, unfortunately, unless you get it on the second-hand market. Then I have Markéta Lazarova. This is a brilliant Czech film that is, I don't know how to describe it. Again, it's quite spiritual. It's a medieval film. I think it's medieval. Am I getting that right? Oh, someone will correct me if I'm wrong. A wonderful film that I've not watched in years, so I really do need to revisit this. Then I got Some Like It Hot. This is a classic. Billy Wilder, one of the greatest filmmakers of all time. And I know this has a 4K disc now from Kino, so I do need to check that out at some point. Next to that is King of Jazz. This was a brilliant blind buy. I had no idea about this film, had never heard about it, and I still don't hear many people talk about this at all. But such a fun, kind of wacky film, a look at early 30s approach to musical filmmaking. Next is Frances Ha, another Noah Baumbach film, very much in the style of Woody Allen. And yeah, just a fun kind of French New Wave inspired film as well. Then you have La Jetée and Sans Soleil from Chris Marker. A brilliant, different approach to filmmaking, which has been very influential on experimental filmmakers. Speaking of influential, Jean Vigo, whose life was tragically cut short very early. He only made this selection of films, but they are brilliant films in this package from Criterion. Then I have Grey Gardens, one of my favourite documentaries. These characters, and I say characters even though they're real people, they feel like characters. Just a brilliant look at life in decay and just getting on with life and just finding the best in life at any moment. Really is a wonderful thing to watch. Then there's Thief, the energetic movie from Michael Mann, featuring the late, great James Caan, who will be greatly missed and turned in many a great performance. This is wonderful, and a great score from Tangerine Dream. Then I have The Innocents, the Jack Clayton movie. For my money, I think this is my favourite horror movie. I've said it before, I think, but it really is just the scariest film I've ever seen. Your mileage may vary, depending on what you find scary, but there is just some chilling imagery in this film. Some very eerie performances from the children as well. And Deborah Kerr is one of our finest actresses. So yeah, I love The Innocents. And then we got Mikey and Nicky. This is Elaine May's film starring Peter Falk and John Cassavetes. Elaine May was a wild filmmaker. Famously, she would just leave the camera running, and they wasted so much film making this film. Apparently there would be times when the actors have left the set and she would leave the camera running just in case they came back and did something amazing. So yeah, she seems like she might have been a bit difficult to work with, but the work that she has produced is definitely unique. Old Joy, this is another brilliant film from Kelly Reichardt, who I talked about before. Next you've got Ministry of Fear from the great Fritz Lang, a greatly expressionistic looking film. Kaneto Shindo's The Naked Island, almost a completely silent movie, documentary-like. There's nothing like it that I've seen. Such a peculiarity, but still a very fascinating watch. Kiss Me Deadly, one of the most savage film noir films of all time. An inspiration on Pulp Fiction, on Repo Man, and probably many other films. Yeah, like I said, savage, absolutely savage. I've got The Music Room from Satyajit Ray, another brilliant film from him. It's kind of poetic in its look at the passing of time and decay and clinging onto the past. There's Deep Cover. This is a brilliant 90s LA noir film. Great performances from Lawrence Fishburne and Jeff Goldblum. Nightmare Alley. This is a very peculiar noir because it's dealing with not the circus, what would you call it? Like the carnival. And it's all about deceit and, you know, the ethics of swindling people out of money, essentially. Minding the Gap, which was a pure revelation for me when I watched it on this disc. Certainly one of the greatest documentaries of recent times. Not just about skateboarding, it's about life itself. Douglas Sirk, All That Heaven Allows, such a beautiful, technical film. Melodrama at its greatest. Sirk was the master of melodrama, and this is an all-time favourite. Jean-Pierre Melville's Le Samurai, Alain Delon, such a stylish performance, such a smooth-looking film as well. It's got that late 60s smooth appeal to it. It's a mad, 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 mad world. Very famous comedy. In my opinion, it's a bit too long. I think a lot of the gags in this, a lot of the comedy could have been a bit more concentrated, but it certainly is unique in its scope. Leo McCarey's The Awful Truth, one of the finest screwball comedies, basically invented Cary Grant. Yeah, one of my favourite screwballs. Next to another one of my favourites, His Girl Friday, Howard Hawks, another Cary Grant movie. Always enjoy watching this. Okay, I just took a quick break, but I'm back now to carry on with this mammoth task of going through my entire Criterion collection. I've just flicked on a light as well, so hopefully the colours haven't changed too much here. But let's continue. So, I've got Tootsie, the Sidney Pollack film with Dustin Hoffman, kind of a precursor of Mrs. Doubtfire, and just an incredibly funny film. Also in my collection, Until the End of the World. This is from Wim Wenders. This is very long, so it's, I mean, if you look at that, 287 minutes. The story behind this is, this was like a passion project for Wim Wenders, his kind of sci-fi movie, and initially the film got cut down a lot because they just wouldn't release it in this form. Then, a few years ago, this appeared, and we now have the director's cut, supervised by Wim Wenders, a 4K digital restoration, starring the late William Hurt. A brilliant film. I loved watching this when it came out a few years ago. Then I've got Vivre sa vie from Jean-Luc Godard. Not one of my favourite Godard films, to be honest. There's just something about this one that I just find a bit distant. But I do know that many people love this, and they love Anna Karina in this movie. Now, this one, Portrait of a Lady on Fire, absolutely exquisite masterpiece from the last few years. Truly a stunning film, and I think if this hadn't come out the same year as Parasite, this would probably be #1 film for that year. Truly amazing. I love the cinematography in this. A very touching story, brilliant depiction of romance and relationship. So yeah, absolutely love Portrait of a Lady on Fire. Then we've got The Asphalt Jungle, the John Huston movie. I love this one. I really, really do. What's so interesting about this? So the film stars Sterling Hayden, and in the special features there's this documentary called Pharos of Chaos, and it's a documentary from the 80s about Sterling Hayden when he was quite old, and he was living in, God, I want to say it was somewhere in France, I might be wrong. He was basically living on a boat, on a little barge on a river, and the documentary is basically just talking to him, and he's talking very philosophically, very lucidly. So yeah, while I love the film, that documentary in the supplements is just something I keep coming back to on this very strange documentary. Is 2 Days, 1 Night, 2 jours, 1 nuit, from the Dardenne brothers. Quite a touching depiction of mental health and just struggle. I mean, that's what the Dardennes are really good at, is the realism, depictions of people struggling. I know that makes their films seem really unappealing. They are very well done though. So if you're in the mood for something like that, they're great at it. I have some of their other films in the collection as well. You have to be in the right mood. You know, if you want to be cheered up, I wouldn't watch this kind of movie. It's you watch this when you want some kind of cathartic release, not necessarily joy. This one, Walkabout, the Nicholas Roeg movie. I've talked about this on my YouTube channel before. A very beautiful film looking at the Australian outback and looking at exploration from the perspective of young people. This is one that I suspect will get upgraded to a 4K UHD sometime soon, because the second sight release that I also own was from a 4K restoration, I believe. So I could see this getting a Criterion upgrade to 4K sometime very soon. Next, Mildred Pierce. Mildred Pierce is just one of the brilliant noir films. I mean, some people don't consider it a noir through and through because it doesn't necessarily follow the narrative of a noir. But in terms of some of the searing cynicism of this film, I just absolutely love it. Directed by Michael Curtiz, starring Joan Crawford. And this was from 1945, so I think this was that after Casablanca. Yeah, I think it was. But Michael Curtiz was one of those directors who he worked within the studio system and was able to churn out film after film. You know, he was a real working director. Got another Mizoguchi film here, The Life of Oharu. Very touching story. Mizoguchi was so good at getting to the heart of people who are struggling in society, people who feel a bit left behind by their society, by their community. In particular, looking at women who are left behind. That's something Mizoguchi was definitely good at. I've got The Gunfighter, starring Gregory Peck, and this is a Western which looks at the legend of people who are famous and people who are hunted, people who are celebrated and are expected to be something that they may in fact not be. I imagine if you are someone who's a celebrity, you might find a lot that's very relatable in this film. And just a stunning film. Ends in a very anti-Western way. I'll just put it that way. I've got another Howard Hawks movie, Only Angels Have Wings, with Cary Grant and Jean Arthur. This is from 1939, famously known by many people as the greatest year of cinema ever, just due to the amount of masterpieces that came out during the year. This film as well, I always point out that it has some of the most amazing aerial photography from a plane and of a plane. So that's something I always come back to for the aerial photography. Next, I've got The Ascent from Larisa Shepitko. This is a brilliant war film, made in the way that only the Russians made war films. There was something about Soviet war films that were just so impactful when I watched them for the first time. Incredible film with some really inventive cinematography. Did I just put that back in the wrong place? Maybe I did. But they're not in any order anyway, so what does it matter? Next, one of my absolute favourites of all time, The Red Shoes from Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger. This is not the 4K release, this is just the standard Blu-ray edition, though the 4K disc is coming very soon, so keep an eye out on my channel for that. Next to that is High Sierra, the Raoul Walsh movie, starring Humphrey Bogart and Ida Lupino. A brilliant noirish, man on the run kind of movie. This edition is great, by the way. I always point it out to people that you actually get another feature film in the special features. You can see here it says you get Colorado Territory, which was Raoul Walsh's Western remake of High Sierra. So great value in this Criterion disc. Then I have The Merchant of Four Seasons from Rainer Werner Fassbinder. Brilliant film. I love the colour palette of this film. That's something that always sticks out to me. And Something that Fassbinder doesn't necessarily get praised for, is his framing. And there are certain shots in this that are so well framed, they almost look like composed Renaissance paintings. So yeah, I love that film so much. Then I've got Detour, the noir film, possibly one of the grittiest noir films ever, and one of the shortest ones, 69 minutes. This is tight for a noir film. A great entry point. This is on a UK disc as well, so the UK folks can get this. And yeah, just a very influential film. I don't think it's on this disc, but I have heard Christopher Nolan talk about this film and how important it was to him when he was making his first film, The Following. So yeah, Detour. Love Detour. Next I've got Mike Leigh's Naked, starring David Thewlis. A brilliant Odyssey film. Kind of feels like a James Joyce book put to screen. It's also nice for me to watch because being from the Manchester area, David Thewlis's character is from Manchester, and Mike Leigh is from Salford in Greater Manchester as well. So a good connection there. I have a great affinity for Mike Leigh's films. This has recently had a 4K restoration through the BFI, and they've put out a Blu-ray which is said to look very good indeed, a bigger improvement on this. So I do wonder if that restoration will get a 4K Blu-ray from Criterion at some point. Next I got My Winnipeg, the Guy Maddin film. Very experimental filmmaking here. A brilliant documentary. Criterion even call it a docu-fantasia because it's blending documentary with a sort of mysticism. There's a magical element to this, and it's a real passionate film about a place. I do like films where the place is very much a character in the film. I know that's a bit cliche when people say, oh, New York is a character in a film or something, but I do enjoy when the place, the location is front and center in a film. Then I got The Piano Teacher, Michael Haneke. A very strange experience when I first watched this because, I didn't really know what to expect. I'd seen a few of Haneke's films before seeing this, but this film truly shocked me. There are some moments where you think, surely the character isn't going to do that. Oh wait, no, that is actually happening. And sometimes you struggle to explain why these things are happening on screen. It's a very bewildering watch, but definitely a powerful one. I think if you go on a first date with someone and they say this is one of their favourite films, that's probably a red flag. Then Lost in America, the Albert Brooks movie. This is about a married couple who are kind of bored with their middle-class life, so they decide to give it all up and go on the road and live in America. However, they have a mishap where they lose all of their money, and as someone who is quite anxious about finances, watching this is actually a very anxious watch for me. When they lose all of their money, it genuinely makes me anxious, as though I'm watching a horror film. So yeah, I have quite a strong visceral reaction to Lost in America. Then we have The Lady Eve, the Preston Sturges movie. Barbara Stanwyck, Henry Fonda, so charismatic as well. Absolutely love that. Then this is a surefire classic from Criterion. It's Andrei Tarkovsky's Stalker. What can I say about this? I probably can't do this film any justice. I'm just going to leave it there. Stalker. Then I got My Man Godfrey. This is perhaps my favourite screwball comedy of them all, and it might even be my favourite film from the 1930s. I've watched this film so many times now. and it's just absolutely brilliant. William Powell is great, but Carole Lombard has some absolutely cracking lines in this film that just absolutely make me fall out of my seat when I watch it. Then we've got Clute from Alan J. Pakula. This is a brilliant paranoid thriller, which the first time I watched it, I wasn't totally sold on. But then I watched it a second time and I actually saw this film is not about Clute. Clute is Donald Sutherland's character. This is all about Jane Fonda, her character Bree Daniels. And this film actually says much more about her and her position in society than it does about his character. So, very interesting paranoid thriller from the 70s. Then we've got The Taste of Cherry, Abbas Kiarostami, very philosophical, I was going to say metaphysical, that's not the right word, but a film that is looking at the meaning of life and the meaning of death and, you know, impending mortality. And it questions faith and our roles in society and everything. Kiarostami was one of the masters, and it's a shame we won't have any new movies from him. Then I've got The Age of Innocence, Martin Scorsese. When I've talked about this film in the past, I've tended to say that I think this is actually my favourite Scorsese film. And a lot of people think that I'm taking some kind of hipster stance there because no one says this is their favourite Scorsese film. But I genuinely believe it. You can see his influences from The Leopard up here, the Visconti movie. You can see that through and through in this. And it's a great adaptation of the Edith Wharton novel. And you know that I love a great historical costume drama. So that's that. And then last on this row is the Jonathan Demme film, Something Wild. I love this film so much. The chemistry between Jeff Daniels and Melanie Griffith is something to behold. And I think this film does not get talked about enough. With a great early performance from the late Ray Liotta as well. So we're about 3 rows down, so I'd say we've probably got the same amount again. So we're in it for the long haul, people. Actually, no, my maths is wrong. We've actually got 4 more rows. So yeah, stick with me, but we'll soldier on. The Story of Temple Drake. This is a pre-code film, which naturally has some things that you would not have seen just a few years later when the Hays Code came in place. So quite a shocking film with some brilliant cinematography from Carl Struess, who worked with F.W. Murnau. So brilliant film, very overlooked. Then I've got L'Avventura, the Michelangelo Antonioni film. This film kind of broke storytelling in half and said that you could do things in a different way. And I think it's a stunning film to look at, especially on the 4K restoration. For All Mankind, Al Reinhardt's documentary about the Apollo missions. A beautiful documentary. And I think for many, many years, this was seen as the best documentary about space travel. There is a 4K disc of this, which I'm going to have very soon, but for now I just have the standard Blu-ray. Then I've got My Brilliant Career. This is the film from Gillian Armstrong. Very underrated. You do not hear many people talk about this at all. Sam Neill is in there as well, alongside Judy Davis. Yeah, I wish more people would check this one out. Definitely seek it out if you want a little underrated gem in the Criterion Collection. Then we've got Swing Time, Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers, you know who they are. George Stevens, one of the greatest directors of the period. Some really inventive dancing for the time in this. I don't know how much this holds up for me watching today. I enjoy it, but some parts do kind of leave me wanting more. And famously, there is a blackface sequence in one of the dancing bits. So a lot of people point that out, how it's obviously culturally ignorant by today's standards. Then I got Death in Venice, another Luchino Visconti movie. A lot of people have trouble with this just because it's in the same kind of waters as Lolita. So it's looking at an older man who has an obsession with a younger boy, which very much kind of mirrored what was going on in Visconti's life. You know, many people pointed out that Visconti's relationships were kind of a bit, God, what's the word? People were just suspicious of some of his relationships. And there's a great documentary, I've not actually seen it yet, the one that came out a few years ago about, what's the boy called who was in this? Bjorn Andresen. There's a documentary about his experience on this film and how this film has negatively affected his life since making it. So I do need to check that out. But yeah, Death in Venice, very interesting film. Then I've got the John Waters film, Multiple Maniacs, which very hard to describe. If you look at independent cinema in America around this time, in the late 60s, early 70s, on one end you had John Cassavetes making quite serious movies, and then on the other end you had John Waters making these absolutely lurid genre mismatches, you know, exploitative films. Yeah, very, very indescribable. You really have to see this to believe it. Not for the faint-hearted. Another one, not for the faint-hearted. Come and See, from Elem Klimov. Very shocking. Very, very shocking indeed. For ages, this was very hard to see in good quality. And now, thanks to Criterion, there is this 2K digital restoration on a Blu-ray. This release is actually region free, which is or it's region A and B, which is very rare for a Criterion. So you can actually import that if you're from the UK or from Europe or anywhere that plays region B. Smithereens, Susan Siedelman's film. This is a great independent look at New York and living in New York when you don't have a lot of money. This is, I think it's a very important film for female filmmakers, and I greatly enjoyed watching this on the Criterion Blu-ray. Then we have Ikiru from Akira Kurosawa. Many people consider this a masterpiece, and I think I have to agree with that. This is a very touching film, a film that deals with mortality and memento mori, and looking at life from a totally different perspective. And I think after watching this, you will probably add more gratitude to your own life. I got Lola Montez from Max Ophuls, brilliantly colourful, playful film, as you'd expect from Max Ophuls. Not one of my favourites of his, but yeah, a very beautiful film indeed. Then I got Nicholas Ray's In a Lonely Place with Humphrey Bogart. This is one of the finest film noirs for sure. I love this film so much, and it's a film about filmmaking in a way, because Humphrey Bogart is playing a screenwriter. So it's a film about some of the darkness of the industry. I've got another Harold Lloyd movie here, Speedy. I talked about Harold Lloyd before. Definitely seek him out if you want some easygoing silent movies to watch. Lord of the Flies. This is from Peter Brook. When I was at school, we had to study Lord of the Flies in English class, which I think it's a mainstay of the education system here in England. We did watch this film at the time, and I've got to say, this film I still don't really connect with. Like, I like the book, although having studied it at school makes me probably like it less. The film itself, I think it's fine, very serviceable, very well directed, but not something that I find myself coming back to often. Then we have the great Bill Forsyth's Local Hero. This is one that I wanted on Blu-ray for ages. You could not get this on Blu-ray, and then it was a few years ago when Criterion announced this. Yeah, just a great film, really great film that I wish more people would see. This one, Clooney Brown, I talked about this recently on the channel. This is an Ernst Lubitsch classic, in my opinion. Does not get talked about when people talk about Lubitsch's best films, but I think it's up there, and I love Jennifer Jones. Next to that, we've got another Kenji Mizoguchi film, a story from Chikamatsu, or I think this is sometimes called a Chikamatsu story. I've seen it called that somewhere else, and apparently also called The Crucified Lovers, which I've not actually seen it named as before. Again, Mizoguchi just so good at drama. Really one of the great dramatists in Japanese cinema. And I remember this looking particularly good from the new 4K restoration. Midnight Cowboy, John Schlesinger, with John Voight and Dustin Hoffman. By the way, when I was in New York recently, I could not stop saying, "Hey, I'm walking here," as I'm crossing each road. One of my favourites, Diabolique, Henri-Georges Clouzot, French thriller. If you like Hitchcock and you want to get into French cinema, I always recommend this. And I don't like being derivative and comparing Clouzot to Hitchcock, because I know he probably would have not liked it all that much. But it's just an easy comparison. It's an easy way in for people to kind of relate to the film. And then last up on this little bit of the shelf, Topsy Turvy, another film from Mike Leigh. I watched this one not too long ago, and while it is a long film, it flew by. It's Gilbert and Sullivan, the story of them bringing the Mikado to the stage. A very colourful film, and you know, you see many of the regulars of Mike Leigh's movies. You've got Jim Broadbent, Leslie Manville as well. Love Leslie Manville, and Tim Spall. So we continue on. I'm back from another break, and we have this film, Kwaidan. This is from Masaki Kobayashi, one of the great Japanese filmmakers. This is a great ghost story film, multiple stories being told here, beautiful colours in this film, and some great horror in this film. Truly expressionistic, this one. Got another John Waters film here, Female Trouble. This one is really provocative, a lot of exploitative material in this one. A lot of shock value, so this one should come with a warning tag, but if you're into being shocked and you're into some perversity in cinema, definitely check out some John Waters movies. I've got another one actually here, another John Waters movie, Polyester. This one, very melodramatic, very much in the Douglas Sirk fashion, as it says here on the back of the case. This one also comes with the Smellorama card inside. So there are certain parts in the film where it tells you to sniff the card. And yeah, there's some pretty pungent smells. And here we are. Randomly, in a random order, we have arrived at Barry Lyndon. If you've seen my videos before, you know that this is my favourite film of all time. I can't really express here succinctly why I think this is my most favourite film of all time. It just gives me a certain feeling every time I watch it. A beautiful film, stunning in every way, in my opinion. 4K digital restoration on the Criterion disc, so one can only hope and assume that sometime soon we will get a 4K UHD. Because it's Stanley Kubrick and we're seeing a lot of his films now being upgraded. So yeah, my favourite film, and I'm very excited for the future prospect of a 4K disc. Then we've got Close Up from the great Abbas Kiarostami. This one very much blending fact and fiction. He was probably the best filmmaker to do that, where he would, kind of film in a documentary style, but also weaving in a narrative, and yeah, really questioning what is real and what is fake. So yeah, very important film in my film journey. Badlands, Terrence Malick. This was his feature film debut. Not my favourite Terrence Malick films. Sorry. I'm losing my words here for some reason. Yeah, not my favourite of his, but very enjoyable. This is very much a two people on the run, lovers on the run, much like Bonnie and Clyde, or like They Live by Night, which is a Nicholas Ray film, which I've got somewhere here in the collection. So yeah, very enjoyable film, very well made. I've got Cronos, the Guillermo del Toro film. This one is one that I greatly enjoy as well. This was his feature film debut. Yeah, he has a great eye for the macabre, a specific eye for fantasy and horror and the gothic, and that really comes across in Cronos. I love this film. Got another Satyajit Ray film, The Big City. What an amazing film. Beautiful to look at. He really was one of the masters, and there's a reason why he is the most prominent figure to come out of Indian cinema. And I have another film from him right next to that, Charulata. This is my favourite film from Rai, and just amazing shots in this. There's there's so much inventive camera work in this movie, so I won't spoil any of it, but if you love a good looking black and white film with some really expressive camera shots, Charulata is one for you. With Close-Up, I just talked about blending fact and fiction and truth and deceit. Well, this film, F for Fake, from Orson Welles, he basically invented the video essay with this movie, and it's just very enjoyable. I love listening to Orson Welles, whether that's an interview online or through this film itself. Yeah, greatly enjoyable look at filmmaking, and Orson Welles was one of a kind. The Squid and the Whale, Noah Baumbach movie. This is probably my favourite Baumbach movie. Has some very funny moments, even though it's a very touching, dramatic film. And another great New York film, I think. Failsafe, Sidney Lumet. This is kind of a companion piece to Dr. Strangelove that I talked about earlier. Very much looking at a similar threat of impending nuclear war, whereas this plays it very straight-faced, very dramatic, and is just an eye-opening watch. Very scary, the scary reality of what could happen. A brilliant film from Sidney Lumet. Another film from Guillermo del Toro, The Devil's Backbone. I know many people treasure this one. This is not one of my favourites of his, actually. I think I really need to give this one another try very soon to connect with. A Poem is a Naked Person, film by Les Blanc, looking at Leon Russell and his life between 1972 and 1974. This really put Leon Russell on my radar. I wasn't familiar with his music, but there was something about a very well shot music documentary, and A Poem is a Naked Person is definitely that. I think this was very hard to see for the longest time, and now that we have the Criterion Blu-ray, it's very easy to see. So yeah, very enjoyable documentary there. Cold War from Pavel Pawlikowski. This one has a special place in my heart because I actually very luckily got to see this at Cannes Film Festival in 2018. And I had such a memorable day because I got to see so many films on this particular day. I saw Cold War, I saw Shoplifters from Hirokazu Koreeda, I saw Burning from Lee Chang-dong, and The Wild Pear Tree from Nuri Bilge Ceylan. So it was a great day of cinema watching. And then later down the line, it got announced for a Criterion disc. So very happy with getting that in the collection. And just a stunning film, some brilliant composition. If you're a fan of unusual composition in shots, Cold War is great. The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp. I've talked about my love for Powell and Pressburger before. This is just absolute masterpiece. I love this one so much. And as always, what they did with, Technicolor and just getting the films to look so sumptuous and beautiful. It's just a masterpiece. Highly recommend it for anyone looking for some classic British filmmaking. Then I've got Ghost World. This is always a fun watch. Terry Zwigoff. This is just very easy watching for me. Kind of idiosyncratic, got some brilliant characters in. A very fun watch. The Palm Beach Story, the Preston Sturges movie, kind of goes all over the place in this screwball comedy and ends up in a very weird ending, but also quite kooky, quite enjoyable. I have such great fun with this. And Claudette Colbert, she was just one of the best people to be on screen during this period. Absolutely love her. Douglas Sirk, Magnificent Obsession. Such a highlight in the kind of, it's not a genre, but in the kind of field of melodrama. He was just the master. And the kind of setup for this film is just so wacky. Jane Wyman is playing this blind woman whose husband was killed in a boating accident caused by Rock Hudson's character, and he pretends to be someone else so he can fall in love with her. It's just absolutely insane. Totally unrealistic, but also has so much truth in the melodrama. So that's why Douglas Sirk was the greatest. And lastly, on this little shelf, we've got Shampoo, the Hal Ashby movie. When my dad was young, he spent some time being a hairdresser, and he always says that his life back then was much like the character of Warren Beatty in this, where he just basically got to smooth talk a load of women. And so my dad always talks fondly about hairdressing when he was younger, and I always think of that when I watch this film. Moving on, we've got La Cage aux Folles. This is the film that was remade as The Birdcage, but I think the French original movie is my preferred version of this story. Very eccentric, a bit camp, but I completely love the story. Orson Welles, Chimes at Midnight. His character of Falstaff may be the greatest interpretation of the character. Orson Welles had such a talent at bringing Shakespeare to screen, and he clearly loved all the works of Shakespeare. And Chimes at Midnight is just such a beautiful, poetic movie. Claire Denis, Beau Travail, a brilliant examination of masculinity in isolation. I always like to compare this to Black Narcissus from Powell and Pressburger, because that film is a look at the breakdown of femininity in isolation. This one is very much the breakdown of masculinity in isolation. So they're a great companion piece, or companion couple, or whatever you'd say. I don't know what I'm talking about there. Moving on, Stranger Than Paradise, Jim Jarmusch, one of his earlier films that really put him on the map. It's a road movie, it's a talky movie, it's a chill out, a hangout movie. And yeah, this is just American independent cinema of the 80s personified. Well, not personified, because it's not a person. You know what I mean. It's encapsulated in this film. Not my favourite period of Jarmusch's career, actually. There's many other films in the collection that I prefer from him. And even some of his recent works, like Patterson, I really loved that film. But moving on, we have William Wyler's The Heiress. And this is a stunning film. Olivia de Havilland is excellent. And I really love the gothic nature of the setting, the house in this movie. Montgomery Clift is great in this film. And something that I always find fascinating about this and Wyler's approach to directing is how he would very much linger on certain shots and give them time to breathe, which was quite unusual, unconventional for the 1940s in Hollywood cinema, where it seemed like everything was speeding up and speeding up. Next to that, Eating Raoul, such a crazy, fun film from Paul Bartel. Kind of exploitative. It's a film about food, I guess. It's also about eating people. It kind of goes in some very weird ways, weird directions. It's one of those that I find it hard to describe, like right now. So if you're looking for something a bit out there, Eating Raoul, such an interesting movie. Then we come to Rushmore from Wes Anderson. One of his earlier movies with such an iconic character in Jason Schwartzman's Max Fisher. And a great look at the life of trying to fit in, feeling like you should be doing so much more with your life and taking on so many things, but actually you're missing the point. That's what I always take from this film. And it is one of my favourite films from Wes Anderson, for sure. Another Anderson here, Paul Thomas Anderson, Punch Drunk Love. This one, I would say this is underrated within Paul Thomas Anderson's filmography. It often doesn't get much of a say, much conversation around it, but I do find it very intriguing. And it was one of those that put Adam Sandler on the map in terms of doing more of a dramatic performance rather than his usual comedy. So yeah, very interesting film, and I love all of the sort of theories, the fan theories about this being a Superman origin story. So it's quite fascinating to hear people talk about those crazy theories. Then we have Pedro Almodovar's All About My Mother. This is a tribute to, the great film All About Eve. It's also kind of a tribute to Hitchcock. I mean, Hitchcock was very important and still is very important to Pedro's films. And so colourful. I think Pedro was also a big advocate of Douglas Sirk's films, and you see that in his melodrama, his colours, and just a great look at grief, motherhood, and Almodovar always concerns himself with great female characters, great mothers in cinema, and I find it such an endearing watch. Then we come to Husbands, the John Cassavetes movie. One of the ones that's not included in his big Criterion box set, which I don't have, unfortunately. I've got all the BFI discs of the movies in that collection, but I do want to get that box set someday. But Husbands, a look at three adult men who are displaying all sorts of traits of masculinity. Some that people see as very toxic, but even in its toxicity, the way these actors are portraying these characters is so real. It really feels real and immediate. And yeah, the three of them together. I mean, the fact that Cassavetes was directing this film and acting in it, and he's got his two friends, Ben Gazzara, Peter Falk in there. Yeah, a very difficult watch, I think, for some people. Quite difficult to see these characters on the screen. There's particularly that famous scene when they're all sitting around a table with a bunch of people, and the way that they're acting towards women in that scene is quite harsh, quite real. But yeah, a profound watch, I think. Now Voyager. This is one that I think is underrated. Not a lot of people talk about this. Irving Rapper's film starring Bette Davis, Paul Hanreid and Claude Rains. A great melodrama. I do love Bette Davis. And just a film that I keep coming back to and that I do think is underrated. Hal Ashby's Being There with Peter Sellers. This is a film that's very important to me. This is one I watched with my dad some years ago, and he loves this film. I love this film as well. And Peter Sellers, you just can't go wrong with his portrayal of Chauncey Gardiner. And it has that very famous ending shot, which some people find very controversial. Some people think it undermines the entire film and what came before. I quite like it. It's quite out there. And what I believe is that that final shot was very last minute. I don't think they were planning on doing it. That's what I seem to remember. Moving on, Straw Dogs, Sam Peckinpah. Absolutely brutal film. One of the most insanely violent films that I've ever seen. Not violence in terms of gore and lots of blood and guts, although there is quite a bit of that in here. Just violent in terms of its depiction of targeted violence against certain people, and feeling like an outsider, feeling like a stranger, and it has you looking at people as though they're not people, as if they're some kind of savage animal. It really shows I'd say the destruction of humanity in some people, the real corruption of the human soul, and it's not an easy watch for sure. Antonio Gaudi from Teshigahara. This is his tribute documentary to the works of Gaudi, going around Barcelona, looking at all his famous architecture. It's just a beautiful film to just have on. There's hardly any words in here, I think. I can't actually remember if there's that many words. It's just a lot of images and sounds, and yeah, very poetic piece. Something that's very easy for me to just put on in the background. I know that might sound like I'm doing a disservice to the film, but it's just one of those great films just to have on. Then we have Gimme Shelter. This is the Rolling Stones film from the Maysles brothers and Charlotte Zwerin. A very seminal music documentary from the 1970s. Not much more to say than that. Very enjoyable. If you're a particular fan of the Rolling Stones, I'm sure you've definitely seen this one. Repulsion from Polanski. Very important film in terms of the history of modern horror and looking at paranoia. And I guess an early look at the breakdown of mental health in horror cinema, because I guess early on in horror cinema the threat was always external, and here in Repulsion it's kind of looking at the horror that might be within, or that might be exaggerated by our own internal workings. Then we've got Burroughs, the Howard Bruckner documentary about the man, the myth, the legend. I've tried reading a lot of Burroughs' works and I don't quite connect. I find them quite difficult. Not that they're made to be easy, but the film definitely made me connect more with him as a person. The Double Life of Veronique from Kieslowski, one of his great works. Then we have a film from Andrei Tarkovsky, Ivan's Childhood, or Ivan's Childhood, depending on how you want to say it. This was his feature film debut, and it's no slouch. This is a great film for a feature film debut. Some brilliant imagery. You can see that very famous shot on the front cover. Yeah, just a great one to watch. And honestly, if you're starting off with Tarkovsky, I'd probably say just go through his films chronologically in terms of when they were released. This is a great place to start. Ending this shelf with Belle de Jour from Louise Buñuel. Catherine Deneuve is brilliant in this film. I love her so much. And this disc is quite old now. This is going back to 2012. There has been a 4K restoration of this film. I have a feeling that Studio Can now may have already put this out somewhere in Europe on a 4K Blu-ray. But I highly anticipate this getting a 4K release, even from Criterion perhaps, sometime in the near future. So we move down to this new shelf where we have some new goodies to look at. So let's look at Elevator to the Gallows. Louis Malle's brilliant film. Sort of noirish in the French New Wave kind of way. Just a brilliant film with a very famous Miles Davis score. Then we have Pick Up on South Street, Samuel Fuller's brilliant film noir film about Cold War paranoia. Or I guess not Cold War, but the paranoia of communism as a threat in America. And this film was the inspiration to Robert Bresson's Pickpocket, which is a completely different film, although obviously similar in theme. The Lady Vanishes, one of Alfred Hitchcock's brilliant British films that he made before going off to America. And this is spy number 3 in the Criterion Collection, so an early entry. The Sword of Doom, absolutely incredible film. Love this one so much, starring the absolutely brilliant Tatsuya Nakadai, and Toshiro Mifune is in there, in a smaller role, admittedly, but such a brilliant film. Tatsuya Nakadai was absolutely amazing at being quite villainous on screen. Got 5 easy pieces. This one's actually still sealed. The reason this is sealed is because I bought it, and then soon after, I think it was soon after, I ended up picking up the what is it called? The American Lost and Found box set, which has this same disc in it. So really there's no reason for me to hold on to this because I already have it in a box set. So I might offload that one sometime soon. But a great film. A great film. Jack Nicholson, brilliant in it. Design for Living, an early Ernst Lubitsch film. This was pre-code, and this kind of looked at a controversial topic, which was having 3 people in a relationship, which is something that, again, we are looking at. People are experimenting with this in the modern day. Lubitsch was just a master of comedy and wit, and yeah, I love this film so much. And we have Teorema from Pier Paolo Pasolini. His film starring Terence Stamp, who comes to this family and has a unique relationship with each member of a household. And then he leaves, and then it's all about the repercussions of him leaving their life. Some people say this is a very religious movie because Terence Stamp's character is meant to be Christ-like, or that's definitely an interpretation. But it was famously banned by the Catholic Church for degeneracy. So yeah, quite a provocative watch. I do very much enjoy Teorema. Like Someone in Love, this is one of Abbas Kiarostami's films that he made in Japan, which was quite an interesting departure for the filmmaker, and I think it completely works. I think this is a great film. I would say this is underrated within his filmography. Often doesn't get talked about. So again, if you want to get on the Kiarostami hype train, check out Like Someone in Love. Island of Lost Souls, early horror movie, based on the Island of Dr. Moreau, the H.G. Wells novel. Photography by Carl Struess. Again, I talked about Carl Struess before. Very good cinematography. And we've got Charles Lawton in there as well, Bela Lugosi. Early horror, probably not going to scare you, but there is some kind of freaky use of costumes in there for sure. Othello, I talked about Orson Welles and his fascination and love of Shakespeare, and he probably is one of the greatest directors to bring Shakespeare to screen, which many people have said is a very hard task indeed, because there is something so inherently theatrical and lending to the stage in Shakespeare's work. World on a Wire, this is Fassbinder's movie, very much in the realm of, I mean, if you look at some of the names that are mentioned on the back here, you've got Stanley Kubrick, Kurt Vonnegut, Philip K. Dick, and looking at concepts that are very important in modern science fiction, like The Matrix and other films like that. So definitely a great film. Quite long though, because it was intended to be shown on television originally. Safety Last, another Harold Lloyd film. I talked about how great Harold Lloyd is earlier, so definitely another one to check out. Next I got The Fugitive Kind. This is Sidney Lumet's adaptation of the Tennessee Williams play, with some brilliant actors in there. Brando in the lead. Not one of my favourite Lumet films, just because I probably will get in trouble here. I think it's a bit too stagey. It doesn't feel like it's very cinematic, I'll put it that way. But that's just my opinion. The Phantom Carriage, Victor Sjöström directed this, who went on to work with Ingmar Bergman. Brilliant silent film, a great New Year film to watch. Wes Anderson's The Life Aquatic, very idiosyncratic film, and I think amongst the Anderson fans, this is one that not a lot of people like as much as some of his other work. I might be completely wrong about this, but I think for some people this is just a bit too much. I do really enjoy some of the performances in this one though. Blood Simple, the Coen brothers feature film debut, a brilliant neo-noir movie. Absolutely love this. To Be or Not to Be, perhaps one of Ernst Lubitsch's finest films, such an impeccable comedy. Jack Benny and Carole Lombard. It's just a beautiful film. Oh my god, my life is so much better purely for the fact that this exists. Next to that is Ashes and Diamonds, the Andrzej Wajda film, looking at Poland's identity crisis at the end of World War II, with an encroaching Russian presence on the border and even within the country. A great stylish wartime thriller. A Brief History of Time, Errol Morris's movie all about Stephen Hawking and his very famous work. What I love about some of Errol Morris's films is that even though he does feature a lot of talking heads, he makes them look very cinematic, because a lot of his talking heads were shot on sets that were designed between him and a cinematographer, so they look very stylized and aren't very boring or drab. You know, the kind of thing that it's not like the stuff you'd see on a news channel interview. You know, they're very much cinematic. And ending this little shelf is It Happened One Night, the Frank Capra movie, one of the greatest screwball comedies, one of the earlier ones, I'd say, 1934. This won Best Picture at the Oscars, I believe. And yeah, just one of my favourites. Absolutely one of my favourites from the period. Love it so much. Moving on, we have A Brighter Summer Day, the film from Edward Yang. This was such a joyous addition to the collection. I remember when this got announced, people were so happy, because for the longest time it was very hard to see. And on a new 4K digital restoration, no less. I would say this is one of the most important films in the history of world cinema, and certainly one of the best films from the 1990s. Came out the year I was born, by the way, so you do the math, work out how old I am. Woman in the Dunes from Teshigahara. There's all sorts going on in here. It's such a complex movie. Very bizarre, very shocking in moments as well. A claustrophobic movie, but a brilliant one. Another Edward Yang one, E.E. This is one of his masterpieces as well, made in 2000. Edward Yang sadly not with us anymore, but you know, his films live on in the Criterion Collection, and I always urge everyone to check out his movies, these two in particular that I have here. Hiroshima Mon Amour, or Hiroshima Mon Amour, Alain René's meditation on love and the sins of the past, and yeah, just some of the absolute tragedy and suffering that the world endured during the last century. Gilda, brilliant Charles Vido movie with Rita Hayworth. Iconic, absolutely iconic when she flips her hair up. Such an iconic scene and a brilliant performance. Absolutely love that one. Then we've got two movies from Monty Hellman. We've got The Shooting and Ride in the Whirlwind. two very spiritual westerns. Westerns that were being made in the 60s that were totally different, or almost completely different to what were being made in the 40s and 50s. Definitely a new take on the genre. Then we have Brazil, Terry Gilliam's movie. What a film. Then I got Hexen, the film from Benjamin Christensen, the silent movie which looks at witchcraft in the Middle Ages, sort of half documentary, half kind of fiction, a real blending of the two forms actually. Very ahead of its time, I would say. Black Orpheus, the brilliant film from Marcel Camus. This was very popular at the Academy Awards when it came out. Just a great look at life and festival and music, and bossa nova was very popular at the time, and that's a very important musical genre in Brazil's history. Then we have In Cold Blood, the film from Richard Brooks, based on Truman Capote's book. Inventive film for the time. This felt very ahead of its time, to be honest. The cinematography from Conrad Hall in this is particularly eye-opening. Then I have The Long Day Closes from Terence Davies, one of the great modern filmmakers from England. Another great childhood movie, El Sur, Victor Erice. An absolute masterpiece, if you ask me. I love this film so much, and I really hope we see some of his other films getting a Blu-ray release soon. It's also announced recently that he's coming out of retirement to make a film for the first time in 20 years or something, so that's great news. Can't wait to see more work from him. Charade or Charade, depending on how you want to say it. Stanley Donen's film, which feels very much like an Alfred Hitchcock movie. Love it so much. Another Terry Gilliam film, Jabberwocky. This one is kind of a miss, in my opinion. It just doesn't really click with me all that much. But I keep it around because I do find it fascinating. I like a lot of the design in the film. Just the film doesn't come together for me particularly. Polanski's Cul-de-sac. Another look at paranoia. Something that he was always fascinated with in his works. Easy Rider. Again, this is in the BBS Story box set, isn't it? Or is it? I'm trying to remember. Is it in there? I'm going to have to look it up now. Yes, Easy Rider is in there. So again, this disc is one that I've got duplicated. But yeah, such an important film in the counterculture of the late 60s. And this does have a 4K disc now, which I don't own. Defending Your Life, another great Albert Brooks movie. Love this film. I probably prefer Lost in America, even though it makes me really anxious. And I still think that Modern Romance is my favourite. The Cameraman, another early film starring Buster Keaton. Well, it wasn't early in his career, sorry, but I mean early in terms of the history of cinema. Anatomy of a Murder. This is one of Otto Preminger's best movies, and even though it is very long, I think it's one of the best courtroom procedural films. Sometimes courtroom dramas can get quite stuffy and get bogged down in the dialogue, but this one, even though it is quite dialogue heavy, is very visual. And then 3:10 to Yuma from Delma Daves, classic story that has since been remade. Just a brilliant western. Then we get to Make Way for Tomorrow from Leo McCarey. It's very sad because you see this older couple kind of getting left behind by their children and their grandchildren, and it's sad. And famously inspiration for Yasujiro Ozu's Tokyo Story. Then you got Memories of Murder from Bong Joon-ho, and I absolutely love Song Kang-ho in this movie. And in every movie. I think he's just a brilliant actor. Ghost Dog, The Way of the Samurai. This is one of my favourite Jarmusch films. Definitely enjoyed his 90s period, his early 2000s period. And Forrest Whitaker in such a philosophical, zen, meditative movie. Fists in the Pocket. This is a very, again, I don't want to use the word underrated, so what else can I say? I just don't hear a lot of people talking about it. More people need to give this one a chance, so look it up. The Cloud-Capped Star. Such an expressive film from India. Absolutely love that one. Certified Copy. Another Abbas Kiarostami film. I have so many of his films. Questioning the nature of reality and of storytelling and what is real, what is not real. Then we have Here Comes Mr. Jordan, a classic Hollywood movie about the nature of death and the nature of redemption and getting another chance at life. The Naked Kiss from Samuel Fuller. I believe it would have been very shocking for the time. Samuel Fuller was such a provocateur. You know, he would really use violence, he would use exploitation in his films to really make the viewer connect with his movies, and you definitely get that. I mean, the opening of this film is so violent and, yeah, just so eye-opening. And I've got to imagine that John Waters is a big fan of this movie, because some of the stuff in it just feels like straight out of a John Waters film. Then we got Phoenix, the film from Christian Petzold. This is from the last decade, and a great look at mistaken identity. Then we've got Tom Jones, the Best Picture winner from Tony Richardson, starring the great Albert Finney. You know, literary adaptations were very stuffy, very old-fashioned, and then this came along and brought with it, you know, the British New Wave, French New Wave inspired way of storytelling. Then we have Election, the Alexander Payne movie. Such a fun movie to watch. Fast Times at Ridgemont High from Amy Heckerling. Whenever people think of an 80s movie, they obviously think of John Hughes, but also this film. This film is so iconic. Next, I've just noticed actually I have got a bit of order here, because all three of these next films are from the same director. So we're looking at the films of Robert Bresson. This is L'Argent, which is one of his later films, where his approach and his philosophy to filmmaking really became not crystallized here, but it was really a summation of his ethos with filmmaking. Got an early one from him now, Pickpocket. I mentioned this before. This is kind of loosely inspired by Pickup on South Street. And then we have Mouchette, Bresson's look at poverty. I mean, Pickpocket in a way is looking at poverty, but this one is really concerning a child in desperate circumstances. Got Destry Rides Again. This is a great film from George Marshall. Two of my favourite actors of the period, James Stewart and Marlene Dietrich. Girlfriends. This one always gets brought up when people talk about Stanley Kubrick and his favourite films. Apparently, in an interview once, he was asked about his favourite movies, and I think he'd seen this one recently, and he said it was one of the greatest films he'd seen in recent times. And because Kubrick didn't do that much in terms of interviews and stuff, of the few he did do, everything gets analysed and pieced over. So that's why this film always comes up in conversation when you talk about Stanley Kubrick's favourite films. Then we've got The Honeymoon Killers, sort of off-kilter exploitation movie from the late 60s. Famously was meant to be directed by Martin Scorsese, but then he got fired from the film, so ended up being directed by Leonard Castle. Then looking at 90s independent cinema, we've got The Day Trippers from Greg Mottola, another great New York film. And then last on this shelf, we have The American Friend from Wim Wenders. This is the Patricia Highsmith adaptation, and all of his films kind of have that global feeling to them. They don't feel European and they don't feel American. They sort of just have this otherworldly feel. I don't know how best to describe it. So we move on now to another row, and we have The In-Laws, the great film from Arthur Hiller. One of my favourite comedies from the period. Absolutely love that one. To Sleep with Anger, Charles Burnett. Great film, much like this film that I talked about earlier, Teorema from Pasolini. Kind of has that same feeling of a stranger coming into a family's home and having a relationship with everyone in the family, and then looking at the fallout from that. Cat People, the Jacques Tourneur, Val Lewton film, kind of invented the jump scare for many people. A Raisin in the Sun, starring the great Sidney Poitier, the late Sidney Poitier. Then we have La Haine. This is absolutely amazing. One of the best films from the 1990s, in my opinion. Looking at youth and masculinity in sort of restlessness, almost in crisis, I'd say. Then we have Rebecca. This was Hitchcock's first movie in America, working with David O. Selznick. Absolutely love this one. Another Terry Gilliam film, The Fisher King. Love this film. Love the performances. Robin Williams, Jeff Bridges. Pierrot Le Fou from Jean-Luc Godard. This one I go back and forth on. Sometimes I like it, sometimes I just don't connect at all. A French film that I really do love now, and this one's still sealed. I need to crack this open. Celine and Julie Go Boating, because I've got the BFI disc, but I wanted to double dip, and I just haven't gotten around to watching this again. Robert Altman's Shortcuts, one of the finest 90s American movies. This was a real comeback for Robert Altman. Yeah, much like with this film actually. I must have been watching these back to back. The Player was the film that really brought Altman back into the limelight in the early 90s. And I'm so thankful that he got the recognition again in the 90s and brought us The Player and Shortcuts. Shortcuts, hugely influential on Paul Thomas Anderson. And you see that particularly in his film Magnolia, which almost feels like it's an extension of this film. And I think Shortcuts is better than Magnolia, but cinema is not a competition. Boyhood, Richard Linklater, very famous film for being filmed over the course of 12 years. Au hasard Balthazar from Robert Bresson. This one should really be with my other Bresson films up there. Another Robert Altman film, Three Women. This one is quite unlike those other two films I just talked about, The Player and Shortcuts. This one is more psychological, looking at the nature of identity and how identities can overlap. Very much like Ingmar Bergman's Persona. John Frankenheimer's Seconds. Absolutely love this film. The Damned from Luchino Visconti. Talked about this recently on the channel. I think this is a great film. Absolutely great film. And a clear inspiration to Rainer Werner Fassbinder, who says that this is his favourite film. The Thin Red Line, Terrence Malick. This was Terrence Malick's comeback after being absent for 20 years. Very controversial amongst actors because some of the actors involved in this film thought that they were going to be the main role and then ended up being relegated because in the editing room he famously cut out a load of footage and just rejigged the film. The River from Jean Renoir. Brilliantly beautiful film. One of the greatest colour films of all time. John Ford's Stagecoach basically invented the Western genre in film. I know that Westerns existed before this, but this really put Westerns and John Wayne on the map. And then we've got The Parallax View. Absolutely incredible paranoid thriller from the 70s. A Special Day, Ettore Scola, from brilliant actors playing against type. These are not the typical roles that you see from Loren and Mastroianni. Facing the Crowd. This is my favourite Kazan film. And I discovered this through the Criterion Collection, so I'll always be thankful to Criterion for this one. Yeah, It is my favourite Kazan film because it's looking at the cult of celebrity and corruption through power and fame. Paris is Burning, brilliant documentary looking at the ballroom scene in New York City. Very touching, very moving, and just part of a subculture that is so important to modern day dance music. Day for Night, Francois Truffaut. I really love this film from the early 70s. One of the great films about filmmaking. An Unmarried Woman from Paul Mazursky. This was a blind buy through the Criterion Collection. And this is why I love the Criterion Collection, because it puts films like this on my radar. And it's very much looking at the role of a woman in society, an older woman, and not an older woman, I'm not talking about, you know, an elderly person, but about a woman who feels like she's having a crisis of identity. And this would be a great companion piece with the recent film, The Worst Person in the World. I think that would be a great double bill. Then we have Panique from Jacques de Vivier. This is a great film about cancel culture, but it's from the 1940s in France. Absolutely love that film. The Lure. This is another oddity that was put on my radar through the Criterion Collection. It's a musical described as darkly feminist. It's a fairy tale. It's about mermaids. Then we come to The Cranes Are Flying. Incredible cinematography. And I'm not just talking about the colours or the lighting. Also in terms of how the camera is placed and how the camera moves. The Uninvited. This is a fun little ghost story. The Vanishing. This is a very difficult watch. Here's one I would recommend to pretty much everyone. The Graduate from Mike Nichols, starring Dustin Hoffman. Iconic film. Everyone knows this film. Everyone knows the music from this film. Canoa, A Shameful Memory from Philippe Casals. This is a shocking film. Very violent and really highlighted a part of Mexican history that I was totally oblivious to. Got Polanski's Macbeth. This one I'm honestly not too much of a fan of. Or at least the last time I watched it I wasn't. I'm sure I will revisit it, because many people say this is the best adaptation of the tragedy of Macbeth. Shock Corridor, another Samuel Fuller film. Very influential film to many modern filmmakers. Another provocative and shocking film is Bigger Than Life from Nicholas Ray. This is incredible. My favourite James Mason performance, where he plays this guy who, you know, he's a nice, normal guy, you know, happy family life, and he takes this experimental pharmaceutical drug and it brings on psychosis and he turns into an absolute monster. Then we have The Cremator. This is one of my favourite Czech films. Completely unique in how the film is edited. The Blob, classic monster movie. Not much more to say about this. You know, it's not a masterpiece, but it is a cult movie. Cold Water. This is from Olivier Assayas. This is a great film. Kind of shows where he would go later in his career. Black Narcissus. I mentioned this earlier when talking about Beau Travail. What can I say that hasn't been said about Powell and Pressburger? I talked about this one recently. Well, this is two films, The Emigrants and The New Land, about a Swedish couple who emigrate from Sweden and go off to settle in America, which is the new land. And it looks at all their hardships and their tenacity, their bravery in creating a better life for themselves. They Live by Night, another Nicholas Ray movie. Mentioned this before when I talked about Badlands. This is lovers on the run kind of movie. Great stylish film. I Married a Witch, brilliant screwball comedy from Renee Clare. Veronica Lake is absolutely mesmerising. Bob Fosse's All That Jazz, one of the finest 1970s movies, came at the end of the decade. Roy Scheider turning in probably his performance, his greatest of his career. Then we look at Shallow Grave. I talked about this recently on the channel as a bit of one of my favourite British films. Danny Boyle's beginning here. The Hit from Stephen Frears. This is a great movie, great crime movie. The Prince of Tides from Barbra Streisand. This one sometimes gets quite unfairly made fun of. I think it's a great film. And I know that even though Barbra Streisand was very famous, still is very famous, she had some great difficulties making the films that she directed. Pale Flower, very stylistic film from Masahiro Shinoda. One of those great, Japanese New Wave movies from the 1960s. The Inland Sea. This is sort of an essay film, a documentary film. I would never, ever have heard of this film if it wasn't for the collection. Merrily We Go to Hell. This is a pre-code marital drama looking at some really serious issues, looking at addiction, alcoholism. Got a controversial one now. Jellyfish Eyes. This is the film from Murakami. Famous artist Murakami. Many people say this is the worst film in the Criterion Collection. Then we got Pariah. This is from Dee Reese. A film that's very important for many people, many young queer black people in America. I mean, for that reason, there isn't a lot for me to relate to in this film. That isn't in no way a negative about this film. Some films are just going to be more impactful for certain people. Masculin Féminin. This is the Jean-Luc Godard film. Watched this recently. Strongly did not like it. Really do not like this film, or at least on recent watching, did not like it. Even though it stars Jean-Pierre Lot, who is, one of my favourite actors of the period from France, I just find the characters so annoying, like insufferable. Then we have Notorious, Alfred Hitchcock, one of his masterpieces from the period. Absolutely love this film. If you've not seen it, definitely check it out. The Breaking Point from Michael Curtiz. I talked about Curtiz before. He was a very prolific director, made so many films. And this one, so this is an adaptation of Hemingway's To Have and Have Not, which I think is the superior adaptation. Then we have Safe, Todd Haynes movie, very relevant for modern day life. We've all been through some changes in the last few years. And I think a lot of people would relate to this in terms of how we relate to our own health and anxiety and worry about health. Crumb. This is a great documentary. Such great characters. Again, it's a documentary, so these are real people, but they are characters. Nicholas Roeg's Insignificance. This is his film where he's bringing together 4 characters who are all stand-ins for famous people, but are never explicitly mentioned to be them. Not my favourite Roeg film, because I find it quite enigmatic, and it's one that I need to watch a few more times. Then I have Traffic, Steven Soderbergh's movie. I watched this one recently as well. I have such memories of this film, not because I saw it when I came out, because I was far too young, but I remember when this would have been released on DVD for the first time. I remember being in one of the local HMV shops, and there was a whole wall of Traffic on DVD. That's just a very strong memory in my mind. Then we got The War Room, film from Chris Hedges and D.A. Pennebaker. This is a great look into the Clinton campaign in the 90s. And then lastly, on this shelf, we have the great screwball comedy from George Cukor, The Philadelphia Story, with perhaps a perfect cast for a screwball comedy. So iconic, endlessly rewatchable. I completely love this film. Completely. One of my favourite films from the period. Okay, one more row to go, folks, and let's kick it off with La Vérité from Henri-Georges Clouzot. Rosetta from the Dardenne brothers famously won the Palme d'Or at Cannes Film Festival. If you're into realism in films, social realism, this is one for you to definitely check out. Holiday, screwball comedy from George Cukor, again starring Cary Grant, Katharine Hepburn. Love this one. One of my favourite films, Paris, Texas, from Wim Wenders. Very unique in that it's from a European director working in America, presenting such a unique look at America. Absolutely love it. Matter of Life and Death, another Powell and Pressburger movie. I'm not going to repeat myself. You know how I feel about them and their movies. Jean-Pierre Melville, Léon Morin-Prest. This is a great film. Really great film. This is out of print, so maybe it might return to the Criterion Collection one day. Then we have Judex from Georges Franju. Beasts of No Nation. This was one of the modern Netflix movies that came to the Criterion Collection. Bottle Rocket. This is the debut from Wes Anderson. The Executioner. This is from Luis Garcia Berlanga, a very important Spanish filmmaker who I only discovered through this Blu-ray edition of The Executioner. On the special features, Pedro Almodovar talks about how important Berlanga is. So I do hope more of his films get a release someday. Then we got Muriel, or The Time of Return from Alain Resnais. Another experimental film from Resnais. Naked Lunch from David Cronenberg. An adaptation of the Burroughs novel. Great costumes, great design in this film. David Lynch, The Art Life. This is a documentary about David Lynch where he is interviewed and the filmmakers are allowed into his life and his creative process. A Touch of Zen from King Hu. One of the finest films from the filmmaker. A very important film in the wuxia genre. And such a beautiful film. And I hope that this gets a 4K UHD one day. Then we've got The Thin Blue Line from Errol Morris. This is one of his finest documentaries. Speaking of beautiful, Days of Heaven, Terrence Malick's beautiful film. Cinematography from Nestor Almendros, one of my favourite films. Top 10 material for me. Howard's End from James Ivory. Talked about this recently as well. Again, another stunning film that is a favourite of mine. Then we've got The Game from David Fincher. I talked about this recently in a video about underrated films, because when you look at Fincher's filmography, not too many people talk about this because it was sandwiched between Seven and Fight Club. So it kind of got overshadowed in both directions. This one also talked about in that same video. Young Mr. Lincoln, John Ford. Brilliant restoration on this. A look at the life of Lincoln before he became president. Another one from that underrated video. Zazie dans le métro from Louis Malle. Inventive, entertaining. This is what the French New Wave is to me. Then we move across. We've got The Ballad of Narayama. This is the Kinoshita film, not the... who was it that did the remake? Why am I blanking? Imamura. Not the Imamura film from the 80s that won the Palme d'Or, which is a great film. Now this is the original Valley of the Dolls. This is a cult film. A lot of people don't like this film in the collection, whereas some people are absolutely mad over it. The Naked City from Jules Dassin, a film that used a lot of real footage. You know, it wasn't shot on set, it was shot on location. Influenced by Italian neorealism. A great noir film, a great New York film. Insomnia. This is the film that the Christopher Nolan film was based on. That was a remake of. This is a fine film, a fine criminal murder movie. For me, it doesn't really elevate above that, but it is a great film. I do enjoy watching it. It's just not one of my favourites. Then we have Jubal from Delma Daves. Great Western. Delma Daves was definitely adept at making Westerns. Tie Me Up, Tie Me Down, another Pedro Almodovar film. Again, very much in his colourful, melodramatic style, inspired by Cirque and Hitchcock. Fantastic Planet, very unique animation film from France, with a great score, very great score to it. Meantime, from Mike Leigh. This is one of his earlier films, starring a very young Tim Roth and Gary Oldman. Talked about this one recently, The Ballad of Gregorio Cortez. Lyrical, poetic western, man on the run, kind of blending fiction and documentary. Another one I talked about recently, you can tell I just put all these ones back on the shelf. Lonesome, brilliant silent film from the period, where it brought in some elements of sound which are not as good as the silent parts of the film. Company, original cast album. Again, D.A. Pennebaker. I have a lot of his films in my collection. This is just stunning. The Black Stallion, also recently talked about this. Beautiful film. Stunning to look at. Touching story between a young boy and a horse. L'Humanité from Bruno Dumont. Very perplexing work. A lot of people struggled with this when it came out. I think they still struggle with it because it's not an easy watch. Next we got Death by Hanging from Oshima. A film which is satirical because it's about a man who is sentenced to death, and when he is due to be hanged, he just doesn't die, and they don't know what to do with him because they just can't get rid of him. Written on the Wind, Douglas Sirk movie. He's a master of melodrama. 12 Angry Men, very famous film from Sidney Lumet. One of those chamber pieces, is that the right term? Where it's just in one room, I think it is. Yeah, it's all set in one room. It's just these 12 actors. And they're just talking, really. But it is still so cinematic because when they are explaining themselves, you begin to visualize what they are explaining. So very unique, very powerful film. The Bridge, this is another powerful film from Bernard Wicki about young boys going to war, and initially, you know, they are excited by war, they are confident, and obviously, you know, war destroys them. You know, war destroys the human spirit. No one can be confident when it comes to war. Royal Tenenbaums, talked about this recently. I said it was overrated. Some people got a bit angry at that. I do think it sort of sits as an overrated film in Wes Anderson's career. I go back and forth on it, but I do enjoy watching it. Hoop Dreams. This is not overrated. This, oh my god. This is life-changing cinema. This is the documentary following two young men in America who have dreams of being NBA players. They're held back due to their circumstances, due to unfortunate injuries, and perhaps the dream itself is unattainable. So this film is about the American dream and a failure of society. This one, Heart of a Dog, I just don't get this film. And I'll admit that. I just don't get it. It's Laurie Anderson's, poetic visual essay. I thought this was very much going to be about dogs. You think it's a film about dogs, and she does talk about the loss of her dog in this film and the grief process. But then it goes over into so many different bizarre directions. She starts talking about 9/11. She talks about the US's obsession with data, capturing data and surveillance, and national identity, and all sorts. The reason I just don't get this film is because it is just so disjointed. The Great Escape. This is a classic. I don't want to be insulting, but this is a classic dad movie. All dads love this. And one day I'll be a dad, and hopefully I'll be a dad, and I'll pass this on to my youngster, and I'll be like, look at this film. This is a great Saturday morning movie. Letter Never Sent. This is another brilliant Soviet film. Very expressive. Some absolutely incredible cinematography and camera movement, much like in The Cranes Are Flying. Showboat. I actually watched this just last night, from James Whale. James Whale, famous for making Frankenstein and The Old Dark House. He kind of got pigeonholed in horror cinema. He wanted to make something a bit different. This adaptation of the Hammerstein and Kern musical production. And it is great. It's really great. In some ways, it's quite progressive how it looks at race, and then in many other ways, it's completely not progressive and very ignorant. Besides that, it's also a very entertaining film. Some of the music is great. The Times of Harvey Milk. Great documentary following a very important figure in a movement. Then this one, Overlord. Just watched this as well. Stuart Cooper movie, shot by the brilliant John Alcott, who worked with Stanley Kubrick. This is a great World War II movie, a great D-Day movie, because it blended footage that they shot for the film, but then also archival footage. And what's brilliant about how this is edited is that the juxtaposition of those two types of film is seamless. So you can be watching a scene with the actors and it's intercut with archival footage, and you don't know the difference. You can't tell, where the edit is, so to speak. Okay, and now we move just to the very last portion of my collection, and everything from here onwards is either not watched, I've never seen it, or I've seen it so long ago that I can't really remember all that much about it. I think I might have about 20 films, so I'll just run through these very quickly. I keep these at the bottom so that I know that when I want to watch something I've never seen before, I know where to come. So yeah, let's just go on with these. Some of these I won't have too much to say about. But yeah, so I got Le Beau Serge from Claude Chabrol. I need to watch this again, because I saw this years ago on the Masters of Cinema Blu-ray. But I think I just wasn't paying attention enough. I can't really remember too much of the film. That's probably one of those awkward film viewings where I was on my phone and just wasn't paying attention to the film, and I know that's sacrilege, so I need to rewatch this at some point. La Ciénaga from Lucrecia Martel. Never seen this, but I love her film Zama, so I need to get to this at some point. Master of the House from Dreyer. This is one of his films I've never seen. Le Petit Soldat from Godard. Never seen this as well, so I need to get to that at some point. Maybe when I'm in particularly a Godard mood. Betty Blue. This is a film I've seen bits of, but I've never watched it in its full 3-hour glory. So I need to crack this open and watch Betty Blue soon. My Life as a Dog, the film from Lasse Hallström. Yep, never seen this. Gate of Hell. This is another one I need to rewatch. I used to have this on the Masters of Cinema Blu-ray, but I picked this up for very cheap, so I got rid of my old Blu-ray. I need to revisit that. The Organizer. Never seen this, but I love Marcello Mastroianni. This is one that has been on my shelf for years and is daunting purely because of the runtime. So it's War and Peace, and look at that runtime, 422 minutes. I can't even do the math on that. Is that like 7 hours? Yeah, so I need to find the time to watch that. I don't know if I'll watch it all in one go. The Makioka Sisters from Kon Ichikawa, but I picked it up because I do like Ichikawa's films. Bitter Ice. This is one I picked up and just haven't gotten around to yet. People on Sunday. Never seen this. And this is from some filmmakers, Robert Siodmak and Edgar G. Ulmer, who were very famous Hollywood film noir filmmakers. But this is before they became big filmmakers. 24 Frames from Abbas Kiarostami. This is one of those that I've not seen from the filmmaker. This was this finished by his son after he passed away? Gosh, I'm not too sure. I'm a bit clueless on this one, so I need to give this a go, because I know some people really do love it. The Samurai Trilogy. I need to watch this in full, because I think I've watched the first one many years ago, and yeah, need to revisit it. Then I got The Tin Drum. This is Volker Schlondorf's film. I've seen this years and years ago on the old Arrow video disc, but honestly can't remember too much about it. So I'm gonna check this out on the Criterion. So I got Blue is the Warmest Colour. Never seen this in full, so I need to watch that. Same with this one, never seen this in full. I did try it years ago and I gave up with it, so I need to give this a go. Jean Dielman. Hollis Frampton Odyssey. Never watched these. I know these are very experimental films, so I'm looking forward to watching these at some point in the future. Kuroneko. Watched this years ago. Kaneto Shindo's film. Can't remember too much about it though. Yeah, really can't. Onibaba sticks in my mind a lot, as does The Naked Island, but can't remember much about that at all, so I do need to rewatch that. Identification of a Woman, Antonioni. Never seen this one, so I'm intrigued by this because it is late Antonioni from the 80s. And then the last single title in my Criterion collection is The Moment of Truth, Francesco Rossi's film. Never seen this, but I have seen some of Rossi's other films. So yeah, hopefully I'll get to that very soon. So that's the end of this case, really. All of these films, we've been through all of these. I'll just very quickly touch on two things at the bottom. So I've got the Essential Fellini and the Godzilla Showa era box sets. The Godzilla set, I still haven't watched everything in here, so I can't really talk too much about this. But it's famously Spy Number 1000, very important in the collection. And then Essential Fellini. This is brilliant. One of Criterion's best releases. Bringing together most of his big films, and it's a real look at his career, his type of filmmaking. Yeah, I just find this is just such a great set of films. So yeah, if you can pick this up in a sale at half off, completely recommend it. So there you go. That was my entire Criterion collection. Almost 3 hours worth of footage of me just talking about all of these films. I do really hope you've enjoyed it. If you've stuck it out to this long, I assume that you enjoyed it. So thanks very much for watching it. If you want to stick around on the channel, I have tons more videos talking about the Criterion Collection, so you should definitely check those out. Anyway, thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you soon.